Hold on for a second. What's up, YouTube family? I would like you guys to make sure you like and subscribe to our video. It would help us get into the algorithms so we can be seen and bring more engaging content to you guys. So like I said, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate you. And welcome to another edition of the Pick and Downs podcast. I'm your host, per usual, with P-Bush here, and Zoo's still absent, but he's still here with us in spirit.
Yes, sir. Oh man, it's DNC week in Chicago, so I'm back at my parents' place. Everyone tried to get out of the city for that. It's a little chaotic down there, but
yeah,
man, just a bit more relaxing environments allowed me to focus on the good old fantasy football. And just told Sean I got to witness Caleb Williams for the first time this past week in person against the Bengals in week 2 of the preseason, but the third Bears preseason game with the Hall of Fame game starting it off.
Yeah.
But man, he's got some moments, and I just think the repetition is going to be huge. And they have a relatively easy schedule overall, but they do have very tough spurts kind of in 4 or 5 weeks. So I know we're going to get into the NFC today, but I'm sure I'll be talking about my Bears a lot this year. And even if it's in the negative, Sean, even if it's in the negative.
For sure. And I will say this is a prime opportunity for the Bears, because if you're looking as a Chicagoan, I don't know if that's even
Chicagoan,
but
yep.
Chicagoan. If you're looking at like the Bulls, if you're looking at the Cubs, those are tough franchises to root for right now. So if the Bears can grab the city back and get them going,
that'll unite everybody.
That'll get Chicago in a good moment or good momentum towards, maybe possibly having the city back on their shoulders. So like people are saying, we're going to be talking about the NFC right now. A lot of good storylines in the NFC. I will say, when I was going through my notes and going through a couple of the teams and players, like the NFC this year has got a couple quarterbacks that are a little bit better than people think, would think. I don't think they're the AFC, but I do think they got some up-and-coming guys in the NFC. So, like I said in our notes, we were talking pre-pod, and we're going to go ahead and start with the NFC East. And P-Bush, what are your, I guess, overriding thoughts about the teams that are in this, I would say, competitive division?
Or I'll just start with kind of the quick ones. The Giants, man, they're just letting Daniel Jones prove it this year, right? Now, they've said prove it for the last couple of years, but, they lost Saquon, and they lost him to a division rival, right? So, their explosiveness will be down. I think Malik Neighbors is just going to get a lot of targets this year. I think it'll be fun to watch him play, but their defense is actually going to cause some problems, but their offense just can't keep up with anybody. So
that preseason game with Daniel Jones, I'm out.
Exactly. Commanders, man, I think they're going to be kind of the surprise team. I know a lot of people, being from Chicago, kind of thought the Bears might be that weird little 8-9 team that kind of comes out of nowhere, and they did finish 7-10 last year. I could see the Commanders kind of doing the same thing with Daniels at the helm. Really like their defense, or the Dan Quinn hiring. I know we've talked about him a lot with the Cowboys and how he really revitalized their defense. But Commanders kind of middling. And on the Cowboys front, I actually would say the loss of Dan Quinn is going to be huge for this team, because that defense, man, they were humming the past couple of years with him at the helm. And we have the whole CD extension situation, which I'm sure that he will get before week 1. But I just am a little hesitant to really put a huge season on this team that's not a great running game, kind of up in the air committee. And then the entire team is really focused on 2 guys, and Micah Parsons and CD Lamb. Excuse me. We've talked about Jake Ferguson. I think I really like him, and their O-line has been solid, as we know. But after that Jordan Love versus Cowboys last year, I just don't know how much they bounce back from that. It might kind of be the end of finally the end of the Cowboys. Should we, or, will he, won't he, right, when it comes to Dak Prescott, Jerry Jones saga. And that leads me to my division winner. And actually the only team that I have making the playoffs out of the NFC East, and the Eagles. Big storyline that I'm actually watching is, and I think you mentioned this a couple weeks ago, Sean, when we were talking quarterbacks, was the Sirianni and Jalen Hurts relationship. There's been reports that it's a bit strained. That was a couple weeks ago, so maybe they've started to mend it. But, if your head coach and your quarterback are butting heads a bit, you could have some problems. But I think this is what you mentioned, Sean, was that Sirianni was taking a little bit of a step back when it came to his involvement directly with Hurts, directly with the offense. And we know that they have the talent. And not only that, but Saquon is, yes, we know DeAndre Swift had a great year last year, but Saquon is an even better improvement on that. And he's kind of he is the original, right, with up there with McCaffrey on the receiving side. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they'll lock in the number 1 seed, but I have them going like 10-7, 11-6. Pretty high on the Eagles' offense, especially this year. Asterisk with the tush push. We got to see how they kind of navigate the red zone if they can't be doing that anymore.
Yeah, I mean the tush push has to be. We got to see it first because you can't just replace a guy like Kelsey, who's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest centers ever. Cam Jurgens, I'm really high on, but I got to see it first. So that's one area where if I see that a couple times, then I'll start maybe looking at the Eagles in a better light. But I agree with you with the Eagles. I just think they have too much offensive talent. Like I said, Johnny Wilson at Florida State, I think he might end up becoming a red zone threat for them if he can stay healthy. I saw he had a concussion. But like I said, Devontae, A.J. Brown, Saquon, love their defense. Jalen Carter, the other nose tackle that I'm forgetting, I think it's Smith or Jordan Davis, that might be his name. I saw on their roster, and I wanted to make sure it was right, but I saw Devin White was on that linebacker core, which I was like,
former Falcon, right? Buck, I mean.
Buck. Yeah, that kind of surprised me. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing if he's like on his last leg, but that's nice to know. You got Slay on your back end, and Ringo is the other corner. So they're just loaded on defense. They also drafted Cooper DeJean, who's another corner. Will Shipley's right now he's probably third string, but he might be able to challenge Gainwell for that second back because he's a really good receiving back. Came out of Clemson, but I just think the Eagles have a lot of talent. And to your point about the Cowboys, it kind of feels like this is a star. It kind of almost feels like in the NBA how it's the big three. And they have the high-end talent. Like they got CD, who's a superstar. They got Ezekiel, who was a former superstar, but he's not really a superstar anymore. You got
Chris Paul,
who's a superstar.
He's turned into Chris Paul, Sean.
Yeah, and you got Michael Parsons on the other side. Like it kind of just feels like, they, and I'm gonna talk about another team in the NFC later about kind of like their plateau. Like I just always think it's not a good idea to have your star receiver who will get paid, but like waiting this late to pay your star receiver. Dak and his weird contract extension, they're just playing the odds with that. Right. They're probably going to end up paying Micah too, but I just don't like that vibe. I don't like the vibes of the Cowboys right now. It just feels like they're too star dependent. And honestly, God couldn't name their second and third receiver. Washington is a wild card. Yeah, Brandon Cook's still there, and another fantasy sleeper that was a dog back in the day. But Washington is a wild card because it's all going to come down to Jaden Daniels. Because to your point, I think you may have mentioned their team is actually talented. Like they got talented receivers, they got a talented defense. Running backs are solid. I'm not the biggest fan of Eckler, but I like Brian Robinson Jr. Like they got guys. It's just all going to be dependent on if Jaden Daniels can, one, stay healthy, with his style, and two, if he can just get to a point where he can assume a leadership position with Washington. So, they're definitely a guy, or not guy, but a team that it's like you look up and they're like 7-9-1 or something, or like 7-8-1, something, a weird record where it's like they're fighting or on the precipice of making the playoffs. And
I think they could give the Cowboys trouble. I think that's the one thing I'm interested in. Like Cowboys could walk into those games.
They could split it. They could split that. And then if it comes down to a tiebreaker or something at the end of the season, you don't want that if you're a Cowboys fan.
No.
But the Giants, I'm out. The Giants, I just don't want to entertain any type of conversation. I'm out on Jones. I was reading some stuff the other day where the GM and the coach, because to me, I don't think this is how Daboll is. I kind of think he's a good coach. Like how Josh Allen progressed was not by accident. That was a factor of Daboll. So to me, you can't tell me that him being able to now Josh has obviously, since he's left, still been Josh Allen. But to me, about quarterback is all about confidence and how you are in the first couple of years. And if you get the right coach who's committed to you, you're going to be able to, take what you learned and then excel. So to me, it's like, I don't think Daboll is as bad of a coach. And I kind of felt like the GM, at least when I was reading certain articles, like he was in and out on Daniel Jones. And to me, that screams ownership. That means, Demaras, who had the relationship with the Mannings, Eli, and Daniel Jones having that relationship with the Mannings, he's wanting to ride it out. So if that is a factor, in terms of how we're playing on the field, you just want to keep Daniel Jones because he's buddies with Matt. I'm out. Like,
Right.
this ain't Pop Warner. Like, get a guy in there that can play. Like you said, Malik
Yeah.
Neighbors is going to be a savior, but I just
He will be
and it
when
might
they
be
get
proven wrong, but
when they get a
yeah,
new quarterback. They will.
yeah, for sure.
No?
So
But,
I'm just I don't think they're going to be the bottom of the league, but I don't think they're going to be one of the best teams. So
no.
I'm kind of out on NFC East. So like transitioning to the NFC North. This division is going to be one of the more competitive divisions. And I know JJ McCarthy just got hurt, but Sam Darnold's solid. So, I the thing I want to start with is the Lions. And I was looking over their roster. Like, tell me where I thought somebody just got traded. But tell me where there's a weak spot.
No,
That's what I thought it was. I was like, oh shoot, because I saw a pick. But I don't see a weak spot on the Lions. Like, their quarterback solid, of course, Jared Goff. They got really good running backs. They got really good receivers, elite tight end. Go over to their offensive line, bookends on both sides. Defensive line is a dog. I think they got Alonzo, or I can't remember his name, but he's a really good linebacker. Terran Arnold, the corner they just drafted. They got the other corner on the other side. Name is forgetting me. Or it's
rookie corners. That's where I focus on the Lions. Is their rookie corners.
But with Arnold, I just feel like he's a Nick Saban product. I think he'll
be fine.
He's gonna be fine.
There will be an adjustment. There will be an adjustment.
Aiden Hutchinson, like, they just are stacked everywhere. Like, the Lions are a solid team. So to me, it's like, it's hard for me to look at them as I'm just gonna maybe see if someone else challenges them. Like, I think it's them just by default and how they finished last year. The only question that I have is Goff's ceiling, which I feel like he does get disrespected a lot, because this is a man who took the Rams to the Super Bowl, and this is a man who took the Lions to the NFC Championship game. And you can't do that being just an average quarterback. Like, maybe you can, but he has moments where he can be average or okay, but he has moments where he's risen and kind of played slightly a bit above over his head. But the question I have is the guy that's in Green Bay able to get to a level that Goff can't get to? Because if he can, then Green Bay is going to make it really weird for Lions fans, because they have similarly a really solid team. Like, that's what Green Bay does. Like, the Lions draft really well, but the Green Bay Packers also always draft well. And they always have a solid defense. They always have solid running backs. They just always figure it out at receiver. Now they got, like I said, you got Watson, Dobbs, you got Jaden Reed, you got Dontavius Wicks. Like, you got guys, they got a tight end. And I was reading another article that they have I think a tight end they drafted this year that they really like a lot. So if they got double tights, that's
already. Musgrave and Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, so it's like, if Jordan Love becomes a quarterback that takes another step to where, his level is slightly higher than the Lions, then I could totally see Green Bay winning the division. So those are two teams where if I had to put money on it today, I'm going with the Lions, because I just think they're a more complete team, and we still need to see more of Jordan Love. But I would not be shocked if Green Bay won, because if Jordan Love keeps, rising and having this meteoric rise as a quarterback, I kind of like that. And then, of course, you have the Bears. Like, they're like, too deep. I was looking at they're too deep too. Like, there's not a lot of scrubs that are too deep either. And their defense is kind of got a lot of dudes on there too. So to me, Caleb, even though he's a wow guy, if he can take care of the football and play within himself and like the offense, and who was the guy you got? The offensive coordinator. I'm forgetting his name.
Shane Waldron from Seattle.
Waldron. Yeah. If that guy can put Caleb in because the one thing with Caleb I want to see more of, which he didn't really do a lot in college, is play within the pocket, because he is really good on the perimeter throwing. And like you said, like you saw him throw Saturday, like he's just, when he's in scramble mode, he's just one of the best quarterbacks, currently in the NFL. I'll go ahead and say that, because he's just good at throwing on the run and contorting his angles. Yep. But I do want to see when it's 3rd and 9 and, you're playing against the Packers and you're down 17-12, like, can you complete that pass within the pocket? Because defensive coordinators are not going to allow you to just run around outside the pocket and throw passes like that. So if he can get that and do that early, the Bears could, really surprise. They could challenge, especially in week 8 to 9 when maybe Caleb's got his feet under him. He could really surprise. And with the Vikings, I mean, I wasn't a McCarthy guy coming out of college. We know the script on Sam Darnold. Right. I'll be watching them for fantasy purposes. So
yeah,
that's it.
It's a good way to put it, because I'll start reverse. I'll start with the Vikings. Just to your point, Sam Darnold, viable quarterback. Now, I do think the hype over him when he came in for those, I don't know how long in that game in San Francisco, but I think everyone was like, wait, He can actually move the ball down the field. He can get him in the end zone, and maybe that's what got him this contract in Minnesota or trade. I forget if they traded for him or not, but besides the point, they're very lucky that Addison did not have a serious injury. It looked very bad. I do think he's going to miss a little bit of time, but you're talking about Darnold having a solid wide receiver duo. He does have Aaron Jones, and Hawkinson will be coming back probably in the latter half of the season. So they're not going to be fighting for the division whatsoever.
No.
But they could definitely be a team that creeps up on other teams and is kind of a party pooper, right? They just kind of take, kind of pull what the Packers really did to the Cowboys last year and just kind of shock teams, right? Now, obviously, that was in the playoffs, and I don't think the Vikings will be there. But yes, JJ, I think he is undervalued in a lot of fantasy drafts. We didn't really talk about him too much last week. But I don't think you should just be letting him completely slide because Sam Darnold is now at quarterback. So target Vikings for fantasy because they're going to all be undervalued. I'll actually go with the Packers next because I have them third in the division. I actually have them. I shouldn't say that. I have them at the same record as the Bears. I think they're both going to go around like 10-7. The Packers' ceiling, I think, is higher just because they have proved it a little bit more. But I think their biggest issue. I know you're a big Jair Alexander guy, right? And I do think that they brought in a new defensive coordinator, but they do need to get their defense in line. Their pass rush has caused issues against teams in years past. I just feel like it wasn't completely there last year. I think, you talked about Jordan Love's ceiling, right? We love their wide receiver group. The issue is this is like the opposite of the Vikings in the sense that it's really hard to read their wide receiver room on who to draft for fantasy purposes because he threw for 4,000 yards, but he didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver last year. Yeah. That's like absurd if you actually think about how unique of a situation that is. But I do think we're probably going to see two of those guys really rise to the top. I know we're both kind of out on Christian Watson, but watch him end up being one of the guys that finally gets it going. Josh Jacobs for me, though, is the crux for that Packers team. He's been used to playing in warm weather or dome weather his entire career. He's going to be asked to go play in Green Bay, the coldest open air stadium in the league. Maybe Foxborough might rival it, but Green Bay is pretty bad. Yeah. So I do really want to see if they can, Love, because for how well he played last year, there were games that he showed his inexperience, right? And if he had Aaron Jones to rely on last year, right? I know he had some injury issues and things like that, but if Josh Jacobs can be what we have seen Josh Jacobs do in years past, I think this team will be pretty damn good. The Bears, I could go at lengths on about this, right? I do think that Caleb is the crux. I think they have the most underrated defense in the NFL. No one
they do.
I mean, you could use fantasy purposes for it. Maybe it's because they don't think they'll get as many sacks. I do agree. I think the Bears' biggest gap right now is a second pass rusher, opposite of Montez Sweat. But they just drafted a rookie who had 3 sacks in the preseason game in his first time playing. So you could say he's going up against second stringers, but this kid's 21. He's also worthy of a second string value at this point, right? So that could be promising. No one talks about their linebacking core. Jalen Johnson was the number 1 rated corner by Pro Football Focus last year, and he did not make the top 100 list. That was a big talking point lately. So they have a true shutdown corner. They have another very good young corner, great linebacking core, great young safeties. And we've talked about their weapons at length on the offensive side. So to your point, if they can control the ball, and not only that, Sean, but what did they do? They literally offset the one thing you have to worry about with rookie quarterbacks with losing bad field position by drafting a punter who is punting 65 yards out of his own end zone and flipping the field. I mean, normally
that's a weapon
situation. You're hoping that the returner doesn't take it to the 50 or your own 45. Well, he's kicking it all the way to the opposite 30, and they're maybe getting to their own 40-yard line, right? So that is a very underappreciated part. And Sean, finally, we consistently and have finally extended a solid kicker in Cairo Santos. So we should not be worrying too much on that end either. So I would say it's a very complete team with question marks more so on transitioning into the league versus talent holes, I guess I would say. So,
I agree.
I think they'll surprise. Lions, I'll be really quick here. I think they're the second best team in the NFC, if not first. I would say my only question mark, I did mention the rookie corners. I just think they'll be fine. Cornerback, it's the same at every respective level. But when you take that jump to wide receivers in the NFL, look who he's going to have to go up against in that division alone. I mean, you're talking about Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, all the Packers guys, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, but they do get to practice against Amon-Ra St. Brown. My only big question other than that, though, is do they have a viable second wide receiver? Is Jameson Williams finally going to
Wild
actually do
card. Yeah.
something? I know he's had the injury issues. I would not compare him to a Kyle Pitts in the sense of what he could have been coming into the league versus how he has produced. He's been injured, right? But they need a true second wide receiver because let's be honest, Laporta's touchdown fiasco, I don't even know how many he had last year. It had to have at least been 10, 11. But they need someone else to step up because we all know Amon-Ra is not the deep threat guy. That's why they drafted Jameson Williams, hoping he would be. So I think that's just another thing to watch with them. But yeah, I have 3 teams making it out into the playoffs. I have everyone except the Vikings, with the Packers and Bears holding wild card spots.
That is Jameson Williams is going to be the biggest enigma, I feel like, just in the NFC as a whole, because if he hits, I've been seeing where, and I know it's not a fantasy pod, but I've just been seeing where he's been getting drafted, and it's like if he hits, you could, as your receiver 3 or 4, that could be a game changer. Because to your point, if you remember anything about college football and watch him at Alabama, like he was definitely, I mean, I don't think he won a Biletnikoff that year, but he was definitely one of the biggest reasons why Alabama was there. And some would say because of his injury, the kind of reason why they lost that game to Georgia. So absolutely. I don't know. I mean, that is going to be, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, Jameson Williams is going to be, he could shift a lot of things for that offense if he comes on strong, because he kind of had a little bit of a rocky start. But going to the NFC West, I don't know if you want to go on this one, where you want to start in terms of where this
is another interesting one. Yeah, because I do feel like everyone's very high on the Cardinals. I mean, we heard Zoo before he had to go out of town. He was extremely high on Kyler Murray, MHJ combo, the Trey McBride, we've talked about that, James Conner. That defense is atrocious. It's the worst in the league. They have no pass rushers of any value. I think their linebacker pick from last year, I have his name here, BJ Ojulari. He tore his ACL 3 weeks ago. I mean, so you're talking about a team that, sure, they might put some shootouts up there, but their defense isn't stopping anything. I would argue that it's pretty much the flip of the Giants. Now, I do think because they have a better offense, they'll be able to win more games, but I don't have them winning anymore. I have them under 500. And at the bottom of this division, along with the Seattle Seahawks, who completely changed regimes. They have a new OC, new head coach, and we all know that Sam Howell got traded out there behind Geno Smith, who I do not believe will replicate his 2022 season. I do think Jackson Smith-Njigba is an interesting pick this year. I think he'll start to eat some targets away from an aging Tyler Lockett. DK's DK. And I would say Kenneth Walker is Kenneth Walker. I think those are their 2 big offensive pieces. But I would say that Geno Smith is on the hot seat because, Sean, we all know this. When new regimes come in and you were not the quarterback that was signed or drafted under, there usually is a little bit of tension with learning a new scheme, but also saying, hey, should we just kind of start fresh with the guy we just traded for? He's a lot younger. Maybe we give him a chance. And that's Sam Howell. So I just think there's a lot of question marks with Seattle, even though they do have a lot of talent on that team. I have them also around that 8-9, 9-8, maybe down into 7-10 at worst, kind of in that area. And then I have the Rams at second. We talked about how quickly they turned around from a rebuild after they won the Super Bowl. Well, this offense is potent, and we talked about Cooper Kupp and Puka at length last week, so we don't have to focus on them too much. But still having Blake Corum to back up a running back that you're kind of waiting to see if he can prove it, right? And Kyron Williams. Well, you just drafted a solid, running back, right? Michigan guy, right? Blake Corum. And then Matthew Stafford. This hinges all on his health, right? I think it hinges on his health, and it also hinges on the new defensive look with Aaron Donald not being there anymore. It gives opportunities. It's going to be a very competitive defensive side, I think, for the Rams, because they're all vying to really kind of lock themselves in as long-term guys for this LA team. I think they go around that 10-7 range if everyone can stay healthy on that offensive side of the ball. And then I have my favorite in the NFC this year, obviously the 49ers. Not much to say about them. They have the same team. They have the same head coach. They have the same system quarterback, all their weapons. Brandon Ayuk situation, we'll see if that creates any locker room drama, but I just think they're way too talented on both sides of the ball. And with Brock at the helm, I think he just steadies the ship, man. That's all they ask him to do. I know, Sean, you had some hate for Brock Purdy last year. I think more.
I still got some.
more to do with the hype versus the quality of play. You know, I think you recognize that he's a good quarterback for a system like that, but he should not be included as a top 10 quarterback, right? Which I completely agree with. But he fits that system, and if they keep that system the same, this team's going to continue to play well. So I have them as the number 1 seed in the NFC this year.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on Arizona. Like, it is enticing to maybe get a little hyped with them because of the offense. Because they got some dudes like Marvin Harrison, they got Trey McBride, they got Kyler who can create with any type of offensive line. Running backs are good. Like I said, I like Trey Benson, I like James Conner. So their offense is enticing, but the defense is just not good. And
it's not
in
keeping
this
them
league,
anything.
they're not gonna. Their offense is good, but I don't think their offense is good enough to win shootouts. So I'm just not. I'm out on them. Seattle, I'm a little higher on because they're kind of Detroit, but without the stability at quarterback. Because put it this way, if you put Jared Goff in Seattle, like, I think they're kind of the same team, maybe with better receivers. Because you got DK, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and Tyler still solid. Their tight end, I think Detroit's tight end is better. But if you go look up and down their roster, especially on defense, like, they got another like Reek Woolen. Like, they got a lot of dudes on their defense that are young. Like, their 2 deep is young. Yeah.
They're trying to rebuild the boom.
Coach, you know, people saw what he did in Baltimore with that defense, and you know, he's going to bring a little bit of that. So I'm wondering if, like, Geno can kind of play as a game manager. Because, like you said, I think he is on the hot seat. Like, if he doesn't perform this year to where they're in the playoffs, they're probably going to be looking at, you know, we need to trade up for a quarterback this year or stay where we're at and draft a quarterback of the future. And I know they got Sam Howell, but Sam Howell seems like, you know, now Washington was kind of a train wreck a little bit last year. That's why Ron Rivera's not there anymore. But I think maybe in the draft you can get someone with a little bit more of upside than Howell. But we'll see. He can bring that.
He's turning into a bit of a little bit of a Sam Darnold. I think he'll end up being a journeyman quarterback that ends up kind of getting playing time wherever he goes.
If someone gets injured.
Jacoby Brissett, another similar guy on that sense too. You know, quality guy. Obviously, he's a lot younger. But if he can maintain his ego and all that, I think he'll obviously keep good backup jobs.
Let me tell you, if, you know, outside of, because everybody wants to be a star, like, backup quarterback, if you're able to be a team player and have that job for 10 to 12 years, that is an excellent job. Outside of, like I said, you probably have
Brian
to move
Hoyer
to different.
Has made like $90 million in his career.
Like, if you got to move to different teams, I get it. Ideally, you would want to be like Mahomes backup because you know he's going to be there forever. And if Mahomes likes you, then you're just probably going to be there forever too. So that would be like that'd be the ultimate backup gig because you're going to be in one city for 10 years and it's just like you play your position, whatever. So that is a great gig. There's no shade to Howell, but Rams are interesting because your point about the defense. You know, they drafted with their first pick Jared Verse, who's a terror off the edge, and then Braden Fisk, who's a really good D tackle who was like running in the 4.8s, who's kind of a physical freak. They're not replacing Donald, but those two guys, like Jared Verse is a freak, and at least Braden Fisk, for his size in terms of playing tackle, he's a freak. So if those guys come along, I love their linebacker, Ernest Jones. He's a former South Carolina alum. He was a low-star recruit, and he just kept improving in college, and now he's one of the top tacklers in the NFL. I like their back end with some of their corners. Like you said, it's going to come down to Stafford and his receivers and the 2 running backs that they got. But Sean McVay is a offensive coach and his ability and what he's done with Stafford in terms of getting him to a new level, they're going to be a tough out. So if that defense does come along, especially on the line of scrimmage, they could be a very tough out. And then that leads me to the 49ers. By default, they're going to win the division because their talent on the team is just like I was going through the tweet. It's so many freaking guys they got. Like they're stacked everywhere. It's unbelievable how they we talk about Green Bay and Detroit, whatever. I just mentioned them earlier, but 49ers up there too. Like they draft really freaking well.
They do.
I don't like guys who are in these weird contract. And like I said, we know guys are going to get paid by, whenever they kick off. We know that. I just don't ever like when there's disputes with your star players going into the season. Like Trent Williams is still in a contract dispute. Ayuk, I mean, I thought he was staying. If I had to bet, he's probably going to stay. But it's like, it's still, he's not practicing. And like I said, I had that rant about Purdy last year. I was reading some reports saying like his training camp has been a little up and down because people internally are saying they see that he's struggling with that Ayuk being on the field with the deep ball. And it speaks to my point, like if everything's not completely perfect, he's going to drop. So that worries me. Like, what if someone gets injured? Like, what if Ayuk gets injured during the season? What if Trent Williams get injured? Now you're bringing in backups, and now we're going to ask Purdy to like, okay, go win it for us, bro. And I don't think he's doing that. So to me, they're going to win that division if everyone stays healthy. Yeah. But I'm also worried, and it's not even really about Purdy because everybody knows how I feel about that. It's, have they plateaued as a franchise? Because you see, you go back to like 21, they went to the Super Bowl, they lost that one. Then last year they were in the Super Bowl, a dog fight with Kansas City. But I mean, you're going against Mahomes. I mean, you can't get mad at it. It's just Mahomes is a magician. But it's like in the NFL, more than any other sport, it's like I mean, I know we got the Patriots, and then we're seeing Mahomes, but what's the difference? 2 generational quarterbacks were running those franchises. Yep. So I'm wondering with San Francisco, does it get to a point where teams in other divisions are going to be improving? Like we all say, this is a quarterback-driven league. I know Purdy is a great, like, quote-unquote quarterback, game manager for it. And I don't want to say he's game manager because he can make some plays and he can move. But have they plateaued as a franchise? Like, is this as good as it's going to get? Because it's just hard for me to see them keep, like, every year just keep going. Because while I do think they have one of the more talented teams in the NFC, like, it's not close. I mean, that NFC Championship game, like, the Lions, I felt like lost that more than the 49ers won it. Like, the Lions had some, they're the new kid on the block. So you could just tell the Lions that, like, Detroit Lions, like, wait, we're in the NFC Championship
House
game? What
money,
the hell?
yeah.
Like, it's like, what are we doing? Like, I guess we play football now. Like, they just never been there. So, like, now that they've gotten that, they've weathered the storm through that, it's like, okay, if they get back there, I think it could be a whole lot different. So, I still like the 49ers in that division. And just because of all their talent, there's a chance they could still make a run back to the Super Bowl. But in this league, it's hard to just keep going back. You just don't do that. Like everybody, I think, like I said, if you're a Patriots fan or if you're a Kansas City fan, you're spoiled because your team always just figured out how to get to the Super Bowl. Normally, that's not how it works. So,
you know what they remind me of a little, Sean? The mid-2000 Eagles.
Donovan McNabb.
But I'm not saying to compare McNabb to Purdy. I would argue that their biggest issue was that they never had a star wide receiver until they got T.O. Right.
And so see what happened when they got
their issue, compared to the 49ers was really the 49ers don't have a star quarterback. Philadelphia Eagles at that time didn't really have a star wide receiver. But then there were issues, contract disputes, all that things with the Eagles.
I just don't like
kept making NFC Championship games, and they just couldn't get over the hump, even in the Super Bowl. So, I understand where you're coming from.
It's hard. It's just hard. It's just hard. And like I said, I think they've also benefited from the NFC not having a lot of quarterbacks back in the day. But now you're starting to see there's more solid quarterbacks. And like to your point, if Caleb hits and then JJ, eventually hits when he's healthy.
Jordan Love continues.
Love continues to get better. Like, whoever Dallas, if they still keep Dak goes away, he goes somewhere else. And then, like there's guys that are coming for the crown. So there's a finite window, I feel like, with San Francisco. Like, to me, I think this is the year. If they're going to go to the Super Bowl again, they have to win it this year. Because after this, I think this is going to start getting weird. Yeah. So that's how I feel about that. And quickly, I mean, I don't know how many thoughts you have on NFC South. I'll just be real quick. I like Atlanta because Kirk Cousins, I'm a big fan of him. I love their weapons. I think he's going to be able to get the ball to them. Them getting Judon is huge. I love that move because their defense on the linebacker and back end level is solid. And I love AJ Terrell. He's one of the lockdown corners they have. So them getting Judon, you got a elite edge and elite corner. Kirk Cousins quarterbacking, all the weapons they have on the offense. I think they're an easy bet for that division. Not big on the Saints because Derek Carr. Love Olave. Alvin Kamara is a dog, but nah. Carolina, I was saying before the pod, wait and see more with Bryce Young and their receivers. And Tampa Bay is weird to me because I've kind of changed my tune on Baker because I was always like, I'm out because he's just a knucklehead and he's like, for to be a first-round pick, he should have been better. But He did get them to the playoffs. They beat the Eagles. Like, they have talent, and you got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Defense, I think, is always going to be solid with Todd Bowles there. I just don't know if their potential could be as high as the Falcons. I think they could be solid, but I think if the Falcons and Bucks are playing, because those are the two teams really in that division, I think the Falcons can get the best of them. So I'm just going with the Falcons.
I like that. I mean, I have Falcons as well, by far. I do have the Bucks at second. My question with the Bucks is they did bring in a new coordinator. So you're asking, a team that is pretty much the exact same, except for the addition of the backup running back in Bucky Irving, who I think is a sleeper pick because Rachaad White, I really want to see if he can do it again. And Rachaad White was a beneficiary of the offense coordinator. I can't remember his name, but it was a lot of check down play, right? That was what Rachaad White made his bread and butter on last year. Baker, you're just asking him to learn yet another system after all of the moving around that he's done. I kind of thought he had a home there, especially with Evans and Godwin, but we'll see. The Saints, to your point, I mean, I love Kamara and I love Olave. I know I did say he's a bit overvalued, but the reason I was doing a bit more research on it is they have one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And that's huge. I mean, it hurts Kamara. It obviously hurts Carr, but I think that actually what led me to conclude on the Olave is if you can't give Derek Carr enough time to let Olave run his routes, then what are you going to expect him to do? You got to at least give him 2, 3, pushing 4 seconds. And it's not like Derek Carr is the most mobile quarterback, especially at this point in his career. And he's just the definition of slightly below average quarterback. I hate to say it because he's had some great statistical seasons. I just don't really see it this year. And the Panthers, if I'm being completely honest, I think they're actually taking really good steps in the right direction. I love the Jonathan Brooks draft. They're getting their RB of the future. We'll see what Bryce Young can do. They gave him a little bit more help with Deontay Johnson. Their defense is actually decent. It's not horrible. I just think, they're going to be towards the bottom of the league, and they're just on baby step mode. And you can't really hate a team for doing that. So I have them obviously at the bottom of the division. But if we're going to lead in real quick, I can just say what I got here. My 7 teams I have making the playoffs, I'll just run them through really quickly. I already said the Lions and Niners, and this is in order. Lions, Niners, Eagles, Falcons. So I do have the Falcons as the lowest division winner. I have them at about 10-7. Which I think is fair because that division always just beats each other up. And we all know the Saints defense, back to them real quick. The Saints defense is pretty legit. It's just that they can't keep them in games where Derek Carr's throwing 3 picks. So, and then my 3 wild cards in order are Rams, and then Bears, Packers. Don't ask me how I picked that. I just can't put the Packers ahead of the Bears. And I know
I get it. Rivalry, I get it.
I'm reaching. The Bears might go 9-8 and miss it. And you know what? To be honest, that's fine. That's still positive momentum. I just think that Keenan Allen's a 1-year rental, and I think they're trying to use that as a little bit of a win now mode. I don't think they'll pay him, especially after that DJ Moore contract. So if they can outperform, I'd say 10-7 is a very good season for the Bears. And I have the Packers around the same. So I won't go through every single matchup, but I do have the Lions over the Rams and Niners over the Eagles in the divisionals. And then I have the Lions actually making the Super Bowl this year. So I have a rematch from last year. I just think it's their year. And especially if they get home field advantage, we know how much Goff loves playing indoors at home. So much better than when he's playing on the road. I know it's a bit of an anomaly to say that because it's not bad every single game on the road. But, he is more comfortable at home, and he is more comfortable on an indoor field. So I think it's the Lions' year. I know we're getting in the AFC next week, and I won't say who, but I just don't think I have the Lions winning it all. But I do think that will be a great NFC Championship rematch.
Yeah. I think I'm with you on all the playoff teams except for the Bears. I didn't really go through and do a bunch of my playoff matchups and teams. I just had the 2 teams that are going to be a division winner. Or not division winner, but championship game. Lions to me is just almost an auto lock because to the point I was saying earlier about them just being so talented on both sides of the ball. Absolutely. I do think last year was trial and fire, and they caught a little bit of fire and was able to ride that through the playoffs, get over the hump. And now I feel like that they've gotten over the hump just in terms of – because sometimes I feel like even though they haven't really been a bad team, at least the last couple of years, like when your history has said you've been a bad team for a long time, like you've had actual Hall of Fame players retire early because the franchise is just a wear and tear on them mentally and physically, like Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. That kind of says a lot about your franchise. So the fact that they kind of got over that hump, getting into the playoffs and then almost making it to the Super Bowl, I just feel like they're due now. And I will say this about their head coach. I was out on him when he was talking about biting kneecaps and all that weird stuff. I feel like he was just trying to be like a new age, coach where he's trying to meme and way to like wins and winning over the team. But there's a lot to be said about a coach that can do that. But now he's in this position. That means his players are buying in. And I think Dan Campbell is a coach who could get them to a Super Bowl with that talent. So I do like the Lions. And for me, I went back and forth with the Eagles and 49ers, and I just settled with the Eagles because I like their talent. The 49ers, to me, I think wouldn't shock me if they got back to the Super Bowl. But I like to the point I was saying earlier, I just, Trent Williams, you ain't paid him. Brandon Ayuk, he's upset. He's going to get paid probably by the 49ers and play. But I'm not big on guys skipping camp because you need camp in the NFL. You need the repetitions. You need the physicality so your body is ready. Because, you sometimes I think I would say a thing that's not really talked about a lot is when stuff like this happens where the star receiver or star player is like out of camp for a long time and then they get paid and they finally come into camp, they usually get injured somehow, either early in the season or midway through the season because their bodies, not to say like the body's not used to playing in the NFL, but it's like it's still a process. You got to rev up. Like it's the same thing like if you, have a car, it's like when there's 0 degrees outside, you're going to let it warm up a little bit. You're not just going to turn on the car and go. So for me, it's like I don't like how that's going. And that's not to say Brock Purdy is not the guy that can get them back to the Super Bowl. But you got it. Like these guys that we're talking about.
They need the system, Sean. I think you're saying if the system is even shattered a little bit.
Just a little bit. If it's off
you're more concerned with Purdy.
I'm more concerned with that. And I don't like anything where you're dealing with a quarterback where you just need everything to be perfect. I'm out on that. Because if you're looking at all these guys that we're talking about who are go-getters in the league, like they all have at least the potential to get to another level. And that's what wins in this league. Like you can get to a certain extent with guys like Brock Purdy, but just put it this
watch out, Sean. He's gonna throw for 4,500 and
he's gonna go crazy. He might go crazy. He might win the Super Bowl this year. And if he does, I'll be the first one to congratulate him. But have a blast paying him when you have to. I just have a blast. I'm telling you. And I don't have any connects with the 49ers, but I'm telling you right now, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 people in there that's like, if we can go get a guy who's a dude, and not have to pay Purdy, they'll go do that. But to me, it's like I didn't like reading those reports saying like, oh, he's struggling throwing the deep ball. Why? You got Debo, you got other guys. Like
Sean, I'd love there. Maybe not like after this season, but it would have been great if they had taken a chance on Baker Mayfield. Could you imagine him with that Niners team? I mean, he fits the energy.
So you know how Jerry Jones is weird. What would Dak be with the 49ers? Do you think he could play to a level above it, or do you think he's the same way as Purdy?
Well, I would say I would think culturally he'd just get eaten alive by like Debo and Trent Williams and all those guys. That Dak just doesn't fit that kind of dog culture that they've instilled the past.
I don't have that in Dallas. That's
and that doesn't mean to say that Purdy does, but Purdy, I feel like they've just kind of bought into him, like everybody, for some reason. Yeah. And I mean, he did prove himself.
They're trying to make it work. Yeah, he proved himself.
Yeah. Dak's interesting. I think there are better spots for Dak potentially, and I'm sure we can talk about that at some point during the season, depending on how some teams shake out. That'll be a good topic to touch on. But I just don't. I think it would be really hard for him to mesh because one, they wouldn't be able to pay him. Let's be honest, right? I don't think they'd have.
Well, they could, but there'd be some guys gone.
Exactly, and at that point, you're back to the Cowboy situation where they have 1 star on one side, 1 star on Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa and McCaffrey or Debo or whatever.
It'd just be McCaffrey probably.
But you want to know who would end up if Dak ever went to San Fran. You want to know who would absolutely eat is George Kittle because Dak loves throwing to his tight ends
for sure.
So I mean, we've seen what
that's another guy. He's so underrated. I mean, not fantasy, but I just love him as a
Ferguson or Kittle.
I'm talking about Kittle because he
blocks.
He freaking fights for first down. Like he's just I love him. His play style is
He's a
tight end because
football
he
guy.
really is a complete. Yeah, he's definitely a football guy. Especially when you think about tight ends, he's complete. So,
Oh yeah.
But I got the Eagles and I got the Lions, and I'm probably more than likely going to pick the Lions to get to the Super Bowl. I just think it's their year.
Yep.
But I could look like a total idiot because Jordan Love could come in and put like a MVP.
There are a lot of
type
the
player.
Rams could. The Rams could. I'm not saying the Bears could, but the Packers could cause issues, right? The Rams could. We have to see what the Falcons look like too, right? You pointed out their defense.
They got a lot of weapons.
Yeah,
they got a lot of
AJ.
weapons.
Let's be honest here, though, Sean. I mean, AJ Terrell did get absolutely cooked by DJ Moore last year in the driving snow.
No.
So
he did. I was looking at some because I was looking at his stats because when Judon got traded there, I was looking at just like his game log, and I did see that on. I emphasized it, but I saw it. I was like, damn, what? I totally forgot about that. I didn't know that happened. But Terrell for the most part, he always I feel like got a bad rap because he got torched in the college football playoff game. I think against Ohio State. He got like smacked on LSU. He got tore up by like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and
who wouldn't?
I think a lot of people just out on him, but I think it spoke to him just as a good player because I mean,
Sean, he had his welcome. He had his welcome to the league moment in the college football playoff. That's pretty much what he had.
Yeah,
facing two of the best young wide receivers and eventually in the league, but he got to do it.
Yeah,
get that out of the way. Get those nerves out of the way.
Yeah, but Falcons. They're a team that's I feel like going in the right direction in that division. So that was our NFC preview. I got overall we can kind of sum up like there's a lot of great quarterbacks. There's a lot of great teams with depth, and this year more than any year is going to be a little unpredictable. So make sure you guys tune into our channel on YouTube at Quantro Knows. Make sure you tune into our channel on Instagram, Tyson Talks, putting up a lot of player comps. This week is probably going to be the last week because I know a lot of people are already starting to draft fantasy and do things of that nature. So make sure you tune into us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star review so we can get in the algorithms. You guys can listen to us. And also make sure if you have any ideas, any comments, anything that you want to put on either our YouTube channel or our Instagram page, TikTok page as well, Tyson Talks _. I read those. I comment. I was telling people this before the pod that I'm commenting when people are commenting on the post, even if it's about Caleb Williams. So that helps with the creative design of this podcast. So make sure you guys do that. And for me, Zoo and P. Bush, we are out.